him. Yeah, you peeping him because I've already stated to you what he's been doing already.
Right.
That so you're looking for that versus looking for the character I fell in love with.
Right. Right. You know what I mean? And they'll return to that person, but it's like it's almost like a luring type of thing, like a
hmm
yeah. What's that girl with the carrot? And I just said that a couple days
Girl
ago.
with the girl with the
No, not the girl with
carrot.
the carrot. No, I mean like when they dangling the carrot in front of you, when they
Oh,
dangling the carrot, like
baiting.
a baiting, like they're baiting. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like almost like a bait and switch type of situation. So
hmm
it's a it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tripped out. It sounds tripped out. It sounds interesting as well as far as the route you took, the perspective you took on it. Like I'm actually quite happy that it's not just a tell-all story. I don't really like read people's books like biopics for sure. I really don't care about biopics for sure. And I do a lot of reading, but I don't do like reading like fiction books. I don't like
Right.
read that,
Right.
but I read a lot of information and a lot of stuff. But when I do hear about books, it does biopics and tell all stuff doesn't interest me.
Right.
And so I'm quite glad that you took the perspective of talking about the same thing somebody had in their biopic, but the mental part, the mentality part of it all, like somebody may be going through. One thing I do think about when it comes to women is I do think heavily that the unstableness.
Mm-hmm. Where's you going with this unstableness? Let me. Where are you going with this?
that the unstableness comes from men. Like I do think heavily that men not necessarily instill what we say crazy is, but like you said, I think it's something like you said, like you don't come crazy. Like I just didn't be crazy. Like it happened in layers. So I do think those layers are implemented by men.
So, well, then let me ask you this: if that's the case, then are men crazy to begin with? If they're inflicting their own crazy on the women?
Absolutely. Remember the women's episode that I was telling you about
Yeah.
that I'm putting
Yeah.
together? Uh, that's going to be on the 23rd of this month. And this is the second one.
Okay.
And hopefully the first one to be released. First one never got released. That was way too unstable of a show. Way, way too unstable of a show. But this is the thing though. I started off the whole show like before we even get started. I'm just let y'all know before the end of the show, y'all have to admit that y'all are unstable creatures. And then, and that kind of, of course, rah, 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 rah. But I was like, hold on. We are just as unstable. Not just because we're with y'all or we're choosing to be with y'all, but I feel like we're the ones that's like inflicting, like making somebody, not just females, just the person you choose to deal with, not just females, not just women, but the person you choose
Mhm.
to deal with. I feel like a lot of it comes from the man side because I'm just thinking back to history, thinking back to back during slavery times, the documents that we have about slavery,
Mhm.
whether it be literature or whatever type of video media you're looking at, you see the this master, for example, you see the master out here raping their slaves, their slave
Mhm.
women, neglecting their own woman, treating not only neglecting their own woman, when they do be around their own woman, the way they treat their woman. Now you already got them whatever type of psychological damage that's happening to the slaves that's being in captivity and getting raped.
Don't forget, some of those men were also raped by their masters.
Oh, of course, yeah, that too. But even on top of that, or going adding to what you said, you got some of the slaves forced to rape the other slaves as well. That's also adding to the psychological damage of women and people in general, but we focusing on the women right now. And the same thing is happening to the master's woman. They're being psychological damaged as well because they out here choosing or being forced to stay with a man of this sort.
Well, I'm gonna say this, that's where it's called the epigenetics, where
Mm-hmm.
the trauma is coming down generations.
Mm-hmm.
There's a doctor, her name is Joy DeCroy, I think. And she has a book talking about that. And I believe it's post-traumatic slave disorder. I think if I'm correct about that. But it goes into that situation what you're talking about. But I will say, as far as the generations, as far as like what's happening today and back then, that's why when I put in the book, I talk about in the beginning that the abusers were first, what do you call it? They were first victims. So but it's like, where did they become abusers? Did they become abusers from genetics? Is it socioeconomic status? Is it environmental? Is it nature versus nurture? It's a lot of different things that played a role in that.
Now,
So everything.
white people are taught they're evil. They're
Well, that's what I'm
raised
saying.
they're
But that's what
raised
I'm
to be
saying.
evil or
Right.
ignore evil.
But I'm
Yeah.
saying I'm talking about like as men and women, like completely.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like as far as across the board, like a lot of that, yeah, is learned behavior. A lot of that is over, generations, but it's also into genetics. It's also into, a lot of different verities that play a part in that.
I want to do some more. I'm gonna do some more research on that genetic stuff because rethinking about the genetics being passed down in that type of like it's kind of hard for me right now. Well, not kind of hard, but I'm
Well,
rethinking um
I'm gonna type in the word for you.
mentality.
I'm gonna type in the word for you. Epigenetics. Look into that.
All right, thank you. But
Mm-hmm.
rethinking about genetics and mentality being passed down genetically,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do some more reading up on that, some more reads because that to me that's kind of iffy because I kind of think I don't necessarily think you're born evil, but maybe the evil that is born in you gets brung out somehow versus it just being instilled in you to be evil.
Well, that's where the nature versus nurture comes into play. You know what I mean? Did it happen in
Mm-hmm.
this environment, or did this happen, from the genetics? I mean, there's a lot of research, I'm gonna say, about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, like the genetics is, it's when you look at it, it's like, you get the traits from your mother and your father.
But what traits though? Sorry to
What
cut you off,
traits?
but what? Yeah, but what traits outside of supposedly 50-50 half of your parents, but
Right.
and looks, outside of looks, how are mannerisms in or personalities per se,
Mm-hmm.
or personality traits per se,
Traits.
ha- passed genetically? Like,
Well, it's funny you say that. I'm gonna say this because, like, just real quick, like I know, for example, like if you go on Ancestry, they have this whole thing with genetics, and it's like they have different things that pass down and talk about different traits that are passed down from both parents. Like I'm not a into genetics like as a profession or trade, you know what I mean? So like
mm-hmm,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
well versed in that. But I will say, like, for example, um, like cilantro. Like people either love it or hate it. And the cilantro could
mm-hmm.
either taste like how it actually tastes like an actual cilantro, or some that have the genetics, it tastes like soap and they hate it. And so that's certain, just like certain things like that comes into play. but
Yeah,
personality also, is also developed as well. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I,
I would think it's more so that than being a trait. Because
hmm
even if it is, even if let's say it is a trait,
hmm
how can we actually say it's a trait versus the kid just paying attention to their surroundings and it just happened to pick up said trait? Like, oh man, that's the same thing your daddy do, or that's the same thing your mama do, and blah blah blah. But this kid is probably just paying attention to daddy or mommy and just mimicking, and it just happened to turn into a subconscious trait of their own.
mm, I mean, I don't know. I would have to disagree just because like there's certain things that you
I
may
don't
not
know. I
have.
just was throwing out thoughts. I
Oh,
don't know. I'm just
got
throwing
you.
out thoughts.
Nah, because I'm like when I see different, different things, like when I think about myself and I see like my family, or I see how they envision like their father, and it's like you wouldn't have got that from mimicking him. You wouldn't have got that. So it's like that's why I think nature versus nurture comes into play. You know what I mean? Like
Okay. Ooh,
so
okay.
it's like
All
they
right.
may have the same they may end up being wanting to be the same profession, but I think that a lot of that is also maybe their natural talent that did come from their family, their lineage. So I think, but it is a lot of research out there, like that I mean I would love to explore that myself. So it's not like it's I'm with you on that. I want to learn that as well.
Yeah. I also want to go back to some of the what we call inherent thought process, or things
Mm-hmm.
that we're teaching our kids, whether it be conscious or subconsciously or not. But from also I hear like this really comes from like the older, like our grandparents
Okay.
or older great grandparents, where the they're getting abused,
Mm-hmm.
or their marriage is not all to par, and society likes to blame it on the time era, which is, I think that's BS to me. But, oh, that's back. Well, back in that time, that was accepted. Blah blah blah. That's BS to me. Like, no, I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I think that's BS. But a lot of the parents, like grandparents, like they basically kind of like teach, or teach their kids, their daughters to be like this. Like, if you want a man, this is what you will have to put up with in order for this man to be happy. And if you want to be basically taken care of, or if you want this a person in your life, this is what you're gonna have to deal with sometimes. Nah, I don't
But
agree with
I'm
that.
I mean, I'm gonna say like, and I think it also depends on where people live, like I said, like the cultural difference, But I will say this, whether it was there was a time when there were women that couldn't, that couldn't get on credit cards, couldn't be on the lease, couldn't have their own bank cards. So that was their way
hmm
of trying to survive. Same thing like with, we talk about slavery, we did what we had to do to survive. I think it was more so survival. I don't condone a lot of the older generation done because we see where it is today. But I
hmm
think that was their way of trying to survive. And I mean, I still see that like, well, you gotta have you gotta do this to have a husband, or you gotta do this to have a man to make it like the focal point. That's the accomplishment of having a husband. Because majority of that time, especially what talking about 70, 80 years ago now, that the biggest thing was being wives and mothers before at least 25, where you'd be considered a spinster. And it wasn't socially acceptable to become, be a spinster back then.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that's more so, not more so. It's not more so, but just as dangerous. Like, 'cause I feel like men are. I feel like men are brought up to be societal men, and women are groomed as well to be societal women. What I mean by that is basically I feel like a woman is groomed to be somebody's wife